either on Twitter or right here. I was talking to an NBC affiliate this morning. Why would I not do the Today Show if you called?
Are you willing to retract the statement?
Could you retract it publicly?
Can you just take our questions? What is this?
I actually, this is a.
What
Will
is
you
this?
retract the statement?
He doesn't need to retract
Either
his
on
statement.
Twitter or right here.
This is America. Come on, take our questions. Yeah, let him ask.
No. Kerry, this is very important. You need to correct the record. If your viewers are going to trust you, you need to retract that statement. Because I have said over and over again that I want a dialogue. I mean, why are you all here? I want to talk to you. I want people from the community.
Who are you, guy?
Will you retract that statement? Will you correct yourself?
Have you handed out 700 tickets, and who have you handed them out to?
I have personally not done that. My people are handing out tickets as we speak. And we will absolutely hand them out to anyone who in good faith wants to hear me. In fact, if I were merely preaching to the choir, these we'd get kind of boring. I like the Q&A. That's why I'm here. It doesn't make sense for me to come and have an private alt-right gathering at a university.
So we'll begin with the Q&A. My first question is, how do you define hate?
No. I have asked you to make a correction, sir. You need to make a correction so that your viewers will trust you going forward. You made a substantial error in your reporting. Why is this a problem? All you have to do is tweet something out or say that right here. Were you wrong?
Well, I don't know.
I just answered your question. Were you wrong?
I will report you handed the tickets out to any person who showed up when we can see that that's
Will you make a correction that you were simply wrong in your original report?
But you said that he said...
I've never said that.
Hold on for a minute. He said only people that agree with us are going to be let in. And he's telling you right now, one, he never said it, and two...
Why don't you allow us to move on by simply correcting your statement? You apparently think that you're going to feel embarrassed or something by simply admitting you're wrong. You were simply wrong. How many times have I had a factual error in a piece I've written? Hundreds. Just do it.
Let's try this.
Were you wrong or not, Kerry?
Let's try this. TikTok. People are here to hear you speak.
Exactly. Why don't you just simply say that you misreported something that was actually a substantial error on your part? And out of ignorance, you did that. Why don't you just correct the record?
Thank you. Because at the time we reported what we were told...
At the time they reported, that is absolutely false. I was asked that question by many journalists, and I've always answered it the same way. You didn't do substantial research, which is okay. People make mistakes, Kerry, but big people correct them.
I'd appreciate that you would kindly, if you want to do it here so everybody can have it, share your contact information. So when...
My contact information is on my Twitter account. It says hello@richardbspencer.com. Tons of people contact me that way. We cannot respond to everyone, just physically speaking. We cannot respond to everyone. I respond to tons of journalists, effectively hundreds over the course of a year.
We'll actually check to see whether we received any correspondence.
Yeah, absolutely. But why don't you simply correct the record, Kerry?
I tell you, his name is Preston. He says he represents you. I have a phone number. Let me provide you with the phone number, and here you can reach
Preston? Wigington?
There you go.
He doesn't represent me. What are you talking about? How does he represent me? He's a man in Texas who invited me a year ago to a speech. You're quoting him as if he represents me? You didn't contact me. You contacted someone else in Texas, and you misquoted me on the Today Show. Why can't you simply correct the record? We're all waiting, Kerry.
I am now reporting that you say you're handing out 700 tickets to any single person who decides that they want to come
In good faith.
And thank you very much. My first question now.
Well, your report was originally wrong, I guess. But I'm going to move on to someone else. So anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
You lead the alt-right movement, and as far as I understand, the main goal of that movement is to create a white end state where every single race lives as a different nation. I just want to know, how do you plan to do that? Because to me, it's kind of impossible just to basically remove at least 37% of the population of this country to any other place because they're not white.
The fundamental goal of the alt-right is not the ethno-state. The ethno-state is something that I have discussed and other people have discussed as a kind of ideal that can be a motivating ideal, a telos, if you were. Much like in the 19th century, many Jews were passionate about the idea of a Jewish state, and many people called them crazy at the time. That's impossible. But they had this overarching goal, and history presented an opportunity for it to happen. I would say not everyone in the alt-right even agrees with my concept of the ethno-state, but I would say that effectively everyone in the alt-right agrees with the notion that a racially or ethnically defined state, a nation state, is justified, that it doesn't need to apologize for itself, that it has the right to be. Could someone get me some water? Thank you.
Spencer, I just want to know, what do you mean for you? I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Latina, and I'm an American citizen. How do you look at me, being Hispanic and Puerto Rican?
How do you look at white people?
Well, I can answer that question. It's a little bit dark in the audience, to be honest, but you actually look rather white to me, to be honest. Hispanic is a bit of a dubious category. It's effectively a language category. Being Hispanic is almost a check mark on a census form. There are many people who speak Spanish around the world and in Latin, Central America, who are effectively white. There are many people who have an Amerindian background. There are many people who have a mestizo background. There are many. It's a very complicated category. Identity is a really rich, complicated thing. I don't think we're the same. No. Well, no two individuals are the same. It's a strange question. No, we're not white supremacists.
Where did you get the word white supremacy from?
Okay. Absolutely, I'm not a white supremacist. I've answered that question probably literally 1,000 times at this point. I've always said no.
Do you ask the same kind of questions to Puerto Rican nationalists? You know there's a Puerto Rican nationalist movement. No, wait, hold on. There's a Puerto Rican nationalist movement, right?
Race is real, race matters, and race is the foundation of identity. And that holds for white people, that holds for all human beings. That is a foundational tenet of the alt-right. I would say everyone in the alt-right agrees with that statement. We want to engage in a kind of identity politics that does come from that it's a new starting point. Our starting point isn't free market capitalism or the quest for equality or communism or anything like that. Those are other ideologies. Our way of thinking starts from that question, who are we, which ultimately is a racial question. What? I'm not a racist in the sense that I hate people and I want to scream at them and so on. No, in that cartoonish version of a racist, I'm absolutely not a racist. I do think that race is real, race matters, and race is the foundation of identity. Yes, sir.
Well, it's my understanding that you believe that all races should live separately among themselves in their own culture. Where's the defining factor if, like with interbreeding in between people from like Mexican heritage, African, all parts of Europe, how far back in the lineage does that define you as being white or Hispanic, any other branch?
All concepts, you could say, have fuzzy borders, and all concepts, there are exceptions to the rule. But that doesn't mean that the concept isn't real. There are, of course, people who have mixed heritage. There are some, odd questions like the Armenians or something like this, or people who kind of exist in two realms. There always will be those things. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an obvious core stock of white people around the world that you could connect with Germanics, with Latins, with Celts, with Slavs, with Mediterraneans and Latins. There's a group of families that make up a broader race and civilization that is the white race. And I don't know that this is really a question that we need to get into. I mean, I know exactly what Mike's about to say, which is you never ask a question to a black person, are you black enough?
Is that what happens is that this question,
You can speak.
This is a question that we always get asked, and essentially what this is I'm Mike Enoch from The Right Stuff. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you don't know who I am, it's fine. My feelings aren't hurt. So this question it's essentially a purity test, and the idea of this purity test is to try and attack white identity and break down the concept of whiteness. And you don't, and I would take it more seriously if some of the people that ask this question when Black Lives Matter gives a press conference, if you said, how do you define black? How far back in the lineage do you have to go for someone to be black? There are mixed black and white people. Do you define them black, etc.? But no, it's only asked to us, and the reason it's only asked to us is because it's an attempt to attack and break down our identity. I don't think we're actually obligated to answer it, but I think Richard's answer was good. But essentially, I consider this a unfair, motivated question that is not attempting to understand our views, but is attempting to attack and break down our identity. That's what I think of the question. So, if you have a, yeah.
As you know, there are a lot of people who are concerned about what you and your followers espouse and do. I mean, you literally scare people. You scare children. Does that, you do. Your actions very much scare children and scare people, what happens. So my question to you is, does that make you happy? Does that jazz you? Does that excite you?
I actually seriously doubt that I scare children. But in terms
Why do you
of,
doubt that, sir? I'm just wondering.
I don't think children are going to listen to a lecture of mine and be frightened or terrified.
No, but they saw what happened in Charlottesville and places like that. So
Did I do that? Really?
you personally?
What? That's your assumption? That I engaged in violence
Sir,
in Charlottesville?
sir,
Did I inspire violence in Charlottesville? Is that what you're implying, sir? What are you implying then?
Go ahead, say it.
Oh, I'm happy to say it. Your words and your actions, your group's actions, scare people. And you know that to be true.
Yeah.
Did we incite violence in Charlottesville?
Who do you think incited it? That's another question. Please just answer my question.
Engaged in violence. Do I scare people? Let me answer this in an interesting way. I'm sure the alt-right does scare people because there are people who have something to lose by the current way of doing things. The alt-right is a revolutionary movement in the best sense of the word. We truly do want to change the world. We think another world is possible, and we want to bring it about. So there are people who benefit from this current regime of mass immigration and mass multiculturalism and endless wars abroad and the whole kit and caboodle of global America. And yes, they do not want a different viewpoint to be heard because we would present the world with a different way of doing things. It would be a much more peaceful world. It would be a much more meaningful world for all human beings. It would be a better and more beautiful world if people like me were in power. So there are people who benefit from the world as it is, and I'm sure they're scared. That's good. Sometimes ideas are scary. When I first read philosophy, I was scared in a way, in the sense that it was changing my mind. What? Nothing. I mean, I don't know. Why do you? You seem to. What happens to them?
What's the assumption behind your question? What assumptions are you making? I mean, it seems like this is motivated. Like, let's fucking be honest here. What are you assuming when you ask that question? Well, where do people that aren't like you go? Their own countries.
They have their own countries right now. They have their other people who don't look like me. I assume you're saying who are non-Europeans. They already have their own sovereign states. What's the issue?
Where?
Are you? Am I talking to preschoolers? You just ask where? Did you literally just ask that?
Yes.
Where there are sovereign countries for non-white people? Are you literally don't get out much? I mean, they're already there. They have their own countries. How is this conceivably controversial?
So bad there that like it's impossible for you to conceive that.
So they would stay in the United States?
Look,
white supremacists that you think it's so terrible to live in a non-white country? I mean, is there something that's so amazing about white people that you just assume everybody wants to live with us? I have a legitimate question that you can answer. It doesn't have to do with substance. But clearly I'm white. Okay. And my question is, why do you guys think you can go around the word white and then double all white people in your ideology and your thinking?
we don't think that. You're asking bad questions. Ma'am, I'm sorry. You're just not smart enough, sir. Ma'am. Your question is actually dumb, like it really is. So I'm sorry. I would rather talk to this young woman. And the concept of an ethno-state. Well, I could explain it in two ways. There are certainly ethno-states that exist right now. The state of Israel is an obvious one. It is a Jewish state, defined. But you could even say that a state like Poland is effectively an ethno-state, even if it's not an ethno-state in the letter of its constitution, that they understand themselves as a Polish Catholics are here, and they make up the overwhelming majority of the population. That is one way of understanding an ethno-state. I have also described an ethno-state in a kind of headier way that calls upon Zionism, and that is an ethno-state for the future that would actually be open for all white people. So it would be open for Scotsmen, it would be open for Italians, it would be open for Russians and white Americans. So it would be something similar to Zionism. The Jewish state of Israel is not just a state for those people in the Middle East. It really is a state for all Jews around the world. And many Jews, perhaps most Jews around the world, understand it as such. So there are two ways. Again, there are ethno-states that exist right now, in name or without the name. But I have talked about a kind of futuristic ideal of an ethno-state for the future that doesn't exist, but could be a goal for the future that we can think about. Yes, ma'am. I think ultimately Charlottesville was good for our movement, but that doesn't mean that there weren't bad things that came along the way. Obviously, one bad thing is when anyone loses their life at what was planned to be a peaceful gathering of speeches and demonstrations. We don't want anyone to get hurt, and we certainly don't want anyone to lose their life. That was a bad thing. But another bad thing that has been underreported is the patent suppression of free speech by Mayor Mike Steiner and perhaps the governor, Terry McAuliffe. They issued a state of emergency order before the event took place, before any violence took place. And then they sent militarized police officers to clear out Lee or Emancipation Park and, in fact, force everyone there who was quite peaceful onto Market Street, where they engaged in fisticuffs and all sort of mayhem with Antifa. They did the opposite of their job. They didn't maintain law and order, and they actually inspired chaos. That was a terrible thing. But the fact is, Charlottesville was ultimately a good thing in the sense that leaders did nothing wrong. We went there to speak, and we were prevented from speaking by a terrible mayor. We learned a lesson. But the fact is, there aren't going to be just simple, easy victories. Everything's a struggle. I thought this college tour was going to be easy, that we'd call people up, and I would come and speak to students. The fact is, it has been difficult. There are roadblocks at every place along the way. And the fact that we keep moving forward, that even under oppression, we keep bringing our views to the public and communicating them with people like you, that shows that it was a victory, that we are persevering. What was the question? I think the fact that someone might be uncomfortable with someone who is talking about ideas, that seems to be actually justification for me to be here. You know, the ideal of an academical village, as Thomas Jefferson talked about it, is not a safe space in the sense of a nursery school for young adults. It's not a place that we need to protect other people's feelings. It's actually a place where we desperately need to talk about controversial and, you could say, dangerous ideas. This is the place to do it. This is exactly the place to do it. If we can't do it at public institutions, where can we do it? And the answer to that is the internet, of course. And there is a huge amount of discussion going on on the internet. But this has to enter the real world. We need to engage with people as humans. Yes, ma'am. Sure. I gave a speech in 2013, in which I described what could be called peaceful ethnic cleansing. I did not call for it. I was describing a historical phenomenon that was actually referencing the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, in which the map of Europe was quite literally redrawn, and it was redrawn on the basis of self-determination or ethnic determination. And so states that had actually had a historical precedent but had not existed, like Poland, came into being due to liberal elites, interestingly, who recreated these states and created things like Yugoslavia and some other states that have not gone as well. Within that was peaceful ethnic redistribution. So my point was that these kinds of things are possible. They've been done before, therefore they're possible again. And my other somewhat more ironic point was that they were actually done at the behest of the liberal elites, who will sometimes go in different directions and value other things.
On top of that, there's one other thing I'd like to add, which is that, the way you phrase that question, it makes it sound like it's this terrible thing. But as Richard pointed out, it's been done many times in history, and it's also if you recall, when the United States engaged in the ill thought out war in Iraq, many intellectuals were talking about how, well, because you have Sunni, Shiite, and Kurd.
Why are you all here? I want to talk to you. I want people from the community.
Who are you, guy?
Will you retract that statement? Will you correct yourself?
Have you handed out 700 tickets, and who have you handed them out to?
I have personally not done that. My people are handing out tickets as we speak. And we will absolutely hand them out to anyone who in good faith wants to hear me. In fact, if I were merely preaching to the choir, these we'd get kind of boring. I like the Q&A. That's why I'm here. It doesn't make sense for me to come and have an private alt-right gathering. Substantial error on your part. And out of ignorance, you did that. Why don't you just correct the record?
Thank you. Because at the time we reported what we were told.
At the time they reported, that is absolutely false. I was asked that question by many journalists, and I've always answered it the same way. You didn't do substantial research, which is okay. People make mistakes, Kerry, but big people correct them.
I'd appreciate that you would kindly, if you want to do it here so everybody can have it, share your contact information. So when
My contact information is on my Twitter account. It says hello@richardbspencer.com. Tons of people contact me that way. We cannot respond to everyone. I've never said that.
He said only people that agree with us are going to be let in. And he's telling you right now, one, he never said it, and two,
Why don't you allow us to move on by simply correcting your statement? You apparently think that you're going to feel embarrassed or something by simply admitting you're wrong. You were simply wrong. How many times have I had a factual error in a piece I've written? Hundreds. Just do it.
Let's try this.
Were you wrong or not, Kerry?
Let's try this. TikTok. People are here to hear you speak.
Exactly. Why don't you just simply say that you misreported something that was actually substantial at a university?
So we'll begin with the Q&A. My first question is, how do you define hate?
No. I have asked you to make a correction, sir. You need to make a correction so that your viewers will trust you going forward. You made a substantial error in your reporting. Why is this a problem? All you have to do is tweet something out or say that right here. Were you wrong?
Well, I don't know.
You don't. I just answered your question. Were you wrong?
I will report you handed the tickets out to any person who showed up when we can see that that's
Will you make a correction that you were simply wrong in your original report? Either on Twitter or right here. I was talking to an NBC affiliate this morning. Why would I not do the Today Show if you called?
are you willing to retract the statement?
Could you retract it
Can we just
publicly?
take our questions? What is this?
I actually, this is a.
What
Will
is
you
this?
retract the statement?
He doesn't need to
Either
retract
on
his statement.
Twitter or right here.
This is America. Come on, take our questions.
Let's start by asking some questions.
Yeah, let him ask a
No.
question. Kerry, ask a
No.
question.
Carrie, this is very important. You need to correct the record. If your viewers are going to trust you, you need to retract that statement. Because I have said over and over again that I want a dialogue.